When Michael Anderson appeared at a gas station near Cherokee in July 2023, he was almost unrecognizable, barefoot, emaciated, with a beard reaching his chest, and draped in ragged scraps of cloth instead of clothes. The man who had vanished 4 years earlier, along with his wife and 2 children in one of the most rugged areas of the Great Smoky Mountains. A man presumed dead. But the most terrifying part was not his appearance. The most terrifying part was what he said about those 4 years, about what had happened to his family, and about what still lies hidden deep within those mountains. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On the morning of June 18, 2019, the paved parking lot at Clingman's Dome, the starting point of the Forney Ridge Trail leading into the remote depths of the Great Smoky Mountains, was quiet and clear, as it typically is on early summer mornings when the Anderson family parked their vehicle and prepared for their day hike. Michael and Dana, accustomed to short outings around Knoxville, saw this trip as an opportunity to take their 2 children, Evan and Lily, to experience one of the park's most famous trails. According to footage from the visitor center camera, all 4 were dressed simply, carrying light backpacks with water and thin towels, minimal gear suitable for a not-too-long hike. Security camera data from the trailhead shows the family leaving the parking lot at 9:12 a.m. under ideal weather conditions, with clear skies and wide visibility. Another group of hikers from Georgia noted in their ranger report that they had seen the family standing near the Andrews Bald sign around after 10 a.m., looking at a map and pointing toward the grassy bald ahead. The plan recorded in the visitor log at the ranger station indicated they intended to hike to Andrews Bald, have lunch there, and return before dark. Everything that morning went smoothly, with no unusual signs recorded along the route. However, by late afternoon, as other hiking groups returned to the parking lot one by one, the Anderson family's SUV remained in its original spot, completely unmoved. According to the family's usual practice on previous trips, they would typically contact relatives as soon as the hike ended. But that evening, all calls from family in Knoxville went unanswered, and Michael's mobile device showed no signal reconnection. After multiple unsuccessful attempts to reach them, relatives grew worried and called the park's ranger center to request a check. The night duty rangers immediately approached the parking lot, confirming that the Anderson family's SUV was still in the position noted from the morning, with no fresh footprints around it and no signs that the vehicle had been moved during the day. The doors were normally locked, all windows intact, and no items were scattered outside, ruling out any collision or altercation in the parking area. After documenting the vehicle's condition, 2 rangers split up to sweep the nearby trailhead area within a short radius, walking along the initial section of the Forney Ridge Trail to look for return traces, but finding no fresh footprints or signs of deviating off the trail. They checked the hiking registration log at the ranger station, verifying that the Anderson family had signed in that morning and planned to return before evening the same day. Cross-referencing with other groups that had entered the forest that day allowed the rangers to pinpoint the last confirmed sighting of the family around 10 a.m. near the turnoff to Andrews Bald. The hiker list also showed no reports of incidents from any group, and there were no records of bad weather or special warnings on the Forney Ridge Trail. After compiling the initial information, the rangers made a preliminary assessment that the family might have strayed too far off the main path, become disoriented, or encountered an incident preventing them from returning on time. The onset of darkness, combined with the dense forest terrain and slippery steep sections of Forney Ridge, significantly increased the risk of accidents in the area. Based on those assessments, the information gathered that evening served as the basis for the next steps. Early the following morning, the ranger team coordinated with rescue units to mobilize SAR forces, K-9 teams from Sevier County, a thermal imaging observation helicopter, and 2 camera-equipped drones to quickly expand the search area. The Forney Ridge Trail was divided into search segments, including side branches leading down to Forney Creek and Noland Creek, where steep terrain and dense forest often cause visitors to veer off course. Teams progressively moved through the main trail sections, checking intersections with unofficial side paths created by locals, while paying attention to common accident spots like slippery rock ledges, soft soil slopes, or areas with thick roots that could cause hikers to slip and fall. The K-9 team swept multiple loops along the main trail, but picked up no clear scent strong enough to follow. The traces the dogs detected all led to high-traffic visitor areas, making it impossible to confirm they belonged to the Anderson family. Simultaneously, the helicopter flew along the valleys leading to Forney Creek and Noland Creek, looking for unusual color signs like clothing, backpacks, or reflective glints from gear, but results were negative. By the third day, search teams began checking deep ravines where fast-flowing water could sweep away or cover victim traces. They examined stream banks one by one, searching for slide marks or disturbances in the mud layer, but finding no evidence of anyone falling in. A few items like scraps of nylon bag, a neutral-colored thin towel, or a water bottle cap were noted and collected, but since they lacked identifying features tied to the Anderson family, they were not considered leads. While ground forces continued searching, the drone team monitored from above, focusing on less visited areas and spots where thick canopy blocked most light. However, that very afternoon, a sudden heavy rainstorm hit, lasting many hours and eroding the soft soil on slopes, washing away any potential traces that might have existed. This was a factor that caused the search to lose critical opportunities to determine the family's route or final stopping point. In the following days, the search area expanded beyond Forney Ridge, including deep forest areas near the North Carolina border, but still no direct traces proved the Anderson family remained in the area or had moved elsewhere. By the 8th day, after covering nearly the entire area they could have reached, the Ranger and SAR forces jointly reported no physical evidence, sounds, or signals related to the family emerged during the search. With the family carrying no tracking devices, leaving no clear trail marks, and no additional witnesses after the 10 a.m. sighting on the day of disappearance, the search file gradually reached its final evaluation. Based on weather data, the danger level of steep drops to Forney Creek, the prolonged loss of contact, the children's ages, and the possibility that all 4 members encountered an incident preventing self-return, the Anderson family case was classified under National Park standards as presumed dead in wilderness, closing the active search phase after more than a week of effort with no results. 4 years after the file was shifted to that status, in the early morning of July 22, 2023, an unexpected event occurred, and development completely outside any scenario the Rangers or investigators had ever anticipated. Around 2:15 a.m., at a small gas station along US 441, near the town of Cherokee, North Carolina, the night shift employee spotted a man staggering inside the store in a state of severe exhaustion. He was wearing an old, tattered shirt covered in dirt and dried mud, barefoot with long matted hair and a body so emaciated that bones protruded under the skin. The man carried no belongings or identification, breathed heavily, and kept glancing toward the door as if expecting something even more terrifying to burst in behind him. The gas station employee initially thought this was a homeless person or someone who had wandered out of the forest after an accident. But the extreme panic and abnormal physical condition prompted them to call local police for assistance. When police arrived just minutes later, the man still could not answer basic questions, only repeating fragmented phrases in a clear state of panic. He was taken to the Cherokee police station for a quick medical check and identity verification, while officers noted his depleted physical condition and a mix of old and new wounds on his body. Since the man had no identification, police took fingerprints and submitted them for state database comparison. Minutes later, the results returned information that stunned everyone present. The fingerprints matched perfectly with the record of Michael Anderson, the man declared missing along with his wife and 2 children in the Great Smoky Mountains 4 years earlier. This confirmation immediately escalated the case beyond local police jurisdiction. They promptly notified the Great Smoky Mountains National Park Rangers and contacted the FBI Knoxville office, the unit responsible for disappearances in the national park area. Within less than an hour, the FBI officially took over the scene, requesting Michael be isolated in a separate room for medical monitoring, limiting contact, and preserving information before proceeding with deeper investigation steps. Immediately upon receiving the case, FBI Knoxville dispatched a rapid response team to the scene and assumed control of all related files. The reappearance of an individual classified as presumed dead for 4 years forced federal authorities to activate absolute identity verification protocols to rule out any possibility of error, impersonation, or tampering, especially since Michael had no identification and was too depleted to be interviewed immediately. Agents took DNA samples directly at the police station under emergency procedures, sealed them, and sent them to the federal lab for comparison with the 2019 missing persons file DNA. Preliminary tests showed a match, while the full comparison confirmed hours later that the man found at the gas station was indeed Michael Anderson. With this result, the FBI officially reopened the Anderson file under a new investigation code, reclassifying the case as recovered survivor from long-term disappearance and shifting all old documents from closed to active status. Their next step was to collect complete initial data regarding Michael's return, including the exact time he appeared at the gas station, geographic location, approach direction, surrounding environmental features, as well as his physical and mental condition at discovery. Gas station security video was extracted and backed up, capturing Michael walking unsteadily from the roadside into the store, while clearly marking the time of appearance and abnormal behavior just before the employee called police. The FBI requested a small isolation of the gas station area to check for any traces or evidence left near Michael's approach path before he entered camera view. Concurrently, agents established information protection protocols to prevent leaks and set up media control zones to limit the spread of unverified data, especially in cases involving victims previously declared dead in national forest environments. In addition to identity verification, the FBI focused on initial assessments of Michael's 4-year survival feasibility. Analysts gathered data from the medical response team, recording initial vital signs, depletion levels, body marks, and transfer time to hospital, all to establish an accurate timeline of his survival condition. Preliminary analysis noted severe malnutrition, along with signs indicating Michael had not survived by foraging alone in the wilderness. Michael's emergence, at a location completely distant from the trail where the family vanished, without any survival gear, led the FBI to quickly rule out this as a natural wilderness survival case. From the data collected in the first hours of takeover, agents determined the file needed full restructuring, shifting focus to the hypothesis that Michael had been detained, forcibly moved, or isolated in an undetermined environment for the extended period. All data on terrain, environmental conditions, distance between disappearance and discovery sites, and Michael's initial physical state were entered into the analysis system. Before extracting any further information from him, the FBI determined that the next priority was not interrogation, but medical evaluation to determine what his body had endured over the past 4 years. Immediately after completing the identity verification procedures and case intake, Michael Anderson was transferred directly to Mission Hospital in Asheville for a comprehensive medical examination. During the initial intake phase, the medical team noted that Michael's body was in a state of severe debilitation, pale skin, near complete loss of subcutaneous fat, significantly reduced muscle mass compared to his prior health records, prominently visible bones in the shoulders, chest, and arms, along with signs of prolonged dehydration, causing abnormally wrinkled and dry, darkened skin. Blood test results revealed extremely low levels of protein, albumin, and nutritional markers, consistent with continuous malnutrition over weeks or months. Regarding the musculoskeletal system, full-body X-rays revealed multiple abnormalities: 3 ribs that had previously fractured and healed misaligned, an old crack in the clavicle, and injuries to the left wrist and right ankle, indicating they had sustained significant impact and healed naturally without treatment. Abnormal calcification at several sites on long bones, combined with markedly reduced bone density, indicated the body had endured prolonged lack of sunlight exposure, severely disrupting vitamin D synthesis. Dermatological examination noted numerous small scattered scars on both forearms and ankles, circular or oval in shape, only a few millimeters in size, consistent with burns from contact with hot objects or heated metal, completely distinct from natural injuries a forest survivor might sustain. Physicians also observed caul-used and multi-layered abrasions around the wrists and ankles, forming faint uniform rings, characteristic of prolonged restraint or binding with rope or rough material. In terms of musculature, tests of upper and lower limb strength showed significant muscle atrophy, particularly in the lower legs, indicative of little or no mobility over an extended period. Michael's balance ability was virtually non-existent when standing upright in the initial hours, and physicians noted uncontrolled trembling when he attempted to lift his left leg, consistent with motor decline due to prolonged disuse of lower body muscle groups. Severe vitamin deficiencies, particularly vitamin D and B vitamins, were evident from test results, and impaired immune function manifested in abnormally low white blood cell counts. Experts affirmed that these markers could not occur in someone self-sustaining in the wild, as even in the harshest conditions, natural light, movement, and wild vegetation would provide minimum essential nutrients and vitamins required for basic bodily function. In contrast, Michael's markers corresponded to a confined environment with restricted movement and light, where nutrition was controlled at minimal levels over many years. Additionally, brain CT scans showed mild signs of cortical atrophy, commonly seen in individuals isolated in sensory-deprived spaces for extended periods. This lack of neural stimulation aligned with confinement in a small, dark, and monotonous space, entirely unlike wilderness survival, which involves constant natural sounds, varying light, and frequent movement. All hospital data, from blood tests, bone imaging, skin injuries, to neurological responses, matched the medical profile of a victim of prolonged detention under restricted light, restricted movement, and repeated physical trauma. No indicators suggested Michael survived through wilderness skills or continuous forest travel. Instead, all results indicated he had undergone systematic, long-term confinement. Based on this clear medical evidence, the specialist team concluded that Michael Anderson's physical condition was consistent with years-long captivity, and his bodily injuries could not have resulted from natural environmental factors, but rather from controlled and severely restricted conditions over a continuous extended period. Concurrently with the physical assessment, the hospital's mental health specialist team was mobilized to evaluate Michael Anderson's trauma level, to determine his capacity to provide accurate information in the early stages of the investigation. From the very first hours of contact, specialists noted numerous abnormal behavioral responses, most prominently a reflex avoidance of bright light. Whenever curtains were inadvertently opened wider or overhead lights turned brighter than average, Michael would immediately tilt his head, cover his eyes, or turn away, a characteristic response in individuals long deprived of natural bright environments. Additionally, he exhibited extreme sensitivity to sudden sounds, even minor ones like the rolling of medical carts, footsteps on tile floors, or door locks clicking. Each unexpected noise triggered a strong startle response, sometimes clenching his hands tightly or curling up, a reaction commonly seen in victims frequently threatened in confined settings. When asked to perform basic tests, such as reading text, identifying images, or answering short questions, Michael displayed cognitive impairment signs, delayed response times, difficulty maintaining focus for more than a few tens of seconds, and intermittent pauses in answers as if losing track of thought. Physicians noted his tendency to scan the room before responding, reflecting hypervigilance, often seen in those long detained or behaviorally controlled. Sustaining dialogue with Michael was challenging, as he frequently paused mid-sentence, observing the door or dark corners, as if anticipating an imminent threat. During moments of psychological instability, his breathing became rapid and shallow, requiring specialists to pause testing to stabilize him before continuing. Furthermore, Michael struggled with temporal sequencing. When asked about the disappearance timeline or perceived elapsed time, his answers were inconsistent. a clear sign of time perception disorder from isolation. Anxiety levels were assessed as very high, hands constantly clenched, body tense, when strangers entered, and eyes continually scanning from people to the door, showing sustained hypervigilance. Certain repetitive unconscious behaviors, such as tapping fingertips on the bed or lightly scratching his wrist, suggested he may have developed coping habits in captivity to deal with sensory deprivation. Based on all these manifestations, the specialist team concluded that Michael was in a state of severe trauma, with features consistent with a victim of prolonged detention. His ability to provide valuable information at this point was deemed low, not due to intentional concealment, but because psychological instability caused fragmented memories and reduced concentration. Therefore, the medical and psychological teams recommended establishing a stable low-stimulation environment and applying psychological support protocols before any detailed information extraction. They also cautioned that aggressive questioning or demands for confrontational details could cause further harm and impair Michael's cognitive recovery. With these medical and psychological assessments, the conclusion was that Michael required significant time for adjustment and recovery before he could fully participate in providing statements for the investigation. After mental health experts determined Michael could minimally participate in a controlled conversation, the FBI conducted an initial statement session to gather preliminary information about the circumstances of his family's disappearance and his reappearance. The interview took place in a medical room with minimal lighting and limited attendees to avoid additional stress. When asked about the events of the day his family vanished, Michael stated they had strayed from the main trail while seeking another viewpoint and became disoriented. He described that in the afternoon, as the family tried to return to Forney Ridge Trail, a strange man appeared and attacked them unexpectedly, rendering him unconscious. According to Michael, upon waking he found himself bound in a dark space, but insisted the captivity lasted only a few weeks, after which he seized an opportunity to escape during the attacker's lapse. He claimed no clear memory of the captivity location, could not identify the attacker, and did not know what happened to Dana and the two children after they were separated. When the FBI pressed for more details, Michael's account became disjointed. At times he claimed confinement underground, at others in a small wooden room. Even the escape timeline shifted from after a few weeks to after more than a month. Many responses were limited to "I'm not sure" or "I think so," indicating unstable and heavily trauma-affected memory. When cross-referencing the statement with medical findings, the FBI quickly identified numerous serious inconsistencies. Nutritional markers, muscle atrophy, bone injuries, sunlight deprivation, and near-zero vitamin D levels indicated captivity lasting many months or even years, completely contradicting the short-term captivity claim. Mishealed bone injuries and skin marks proved repeated impacts over extended time, impossible in a mere few weeks' detention. Changes in time perception, orientation, and narrative structure also showed fragmented memory unreliable for direct investigative conclusions. Participating psychologists assessed the initial statement as defensive and heavily influenced by prolonged fear, while noting typical signs of a victim subjected to long-term psychological control or sensory isolation. The FBI reviewed the entire content and concluded the first statement's reliability was low, unsuitable as primary guidance for any search operations or scene reconstruction. Additionally, deeper probing at this stage could cause psychological harm and hinder Michael's recovery. With this evaluation, the investigative team decided to temporarily disregard the preliminary statement for directing further actions, shifting focus to medical, environmental, and other objective data before conducting additional interviews when Michael's condition stabilized. Immediately after the FBI concluded that Michael's first statement lacked sufficient reliability to guide the investigation, an environmental forensics team was deployed to analyze all remaining traces on his person to determine the actual location he occupied prior to being found. Technicians collected soil samples adhering to clothing and footwear, as well as from hair, fingernails, and skin areas with fine dust. Initial microscopic examination revealed a distinctive gray-brown clay mud mixture with fine particles and high adhesion. Cross-referencing with the park's sediment database, experts identified it as soil unique to the Forney Creek Basin, a low-lying humid valley deep in the southern Great Smoky Mountains, where high moisture and thick plant decomposition create distinctive soil properties. This soil type does not occur on Forney Ridge Trail, where the family disappeared, nor on any popular trails near the gas station where Michael was found, indicating he had come from an entirely different area than suggested by getting lost or escaping after a few weeks. Alongside soil analysis, the forensics team examined pollen grains in Michael's hair and collar. Based on grain structure and staining color, they identified pollen from two plants, a fern species growing in mid-elevation moist forests, and a shrub found only in dense canopy areas near streams in Forney Creek Basin. The pollen release cycle for these species in the Smokies is brief, and annual data show such pollen persists on clothing or skin for less than 24 hours before wind or body movement dislodges it. Thus, their presence on Michael proved he left an area containing these plants very shortly before appearing at the gas station. Concurrently, the entomology team examined 3 small insects on Michael's wrist and nape, 1 forest tick species and 2 individuals from moisture-loving families near streams. Notably, the tick species resides only in mid-Forney Creek, under dense shade and moist vegetation, not near roads or open trails. Attachment duration, estimated from blood engorgement and size, was under 1 day, aligning with pollen findings. Combined analyses allowed the forensics team to establish a critical timeline. Michael left an area ecologically matching Forney Creek Basin within under 24 hours of being recorded at the gas station. This entirely refuted the possibility he wandered the forest for many days or self-traveled a long distance from the original disappearance site. The terrain between the points, dozens of miles of dense forest, deep valleys, and steep slopes, made long-distance travel in his debilitated state impossible in such short time. Environmental experts also analyzed soil accumulation on heels and under nails, indicating travel over soft, moist, slightly sinking ground, unlike dry or gravelly surfaces near populated areas. All data reinforced that Michael had just emerged from a confined, humid, light-deprived space, fully consistent with medical conclusions on malnutrition and atrophy, rather than an extended outdoor journey. When the FBI cross-referenced environmental forensics results with Michael's initial claim of short captivity, followed by escape, the contradictions became undeniable. His body bore marks of years without light or movement, while soil, pollen, and insects showed he left a specific environment less than 24 hours prior. Based on all evidence, the forensics team concluded Michael had not wandered for days in the forest, nor self-traveled far from captivity. Instead, evidence indicated he remained fixed at one location for a long period before escaping or being released, very close to his appearance at the gas station. From that conclusion, the focus of the investigation was forced to shift when statements could not yet serve as a basis and physical evidence had pinpointed a specific ecosystem. The FBI proceeded with a behavioral assessment step to determine the degree of Michael's unconscious connection to the geographic area he had just left. Using a topographic map of the area, the investigators sought to compare his physiological and behavioral responses, a technique commonly applied when the victim is not yet ready or stable enough to provide highly accurate statements. In a controlled assessment session, the agents spread out a detailed topographic map of the southern part of the Great Smoky Mountains in front of Michael, covering the entire area from Forney Ridge to Nolan Creek and the branches leading down into the deep valley, while attaching devices to monitor heart rate, skin conductance, and eye movement according to standard behavioral analysis protocols. The assessment environment was kept as quiet as possible to ensure all responses stemmed from visual stimulation and internal emotions. When the map was placed in front of him, Michael immediately became alert. His eyes continuously darted from the edge of the paper to the door of the room, but did not focus on any specific area. When simply asked to look at the map without describing or answering questions, his recorded eye movements showed clear avoidance of the regions belonging to Forney Ridge and Clingman's Dome, the locations where he was last seen with his family. In contrast, when his gaze unconsciously moved down to the part of the map depicting Forney Creek Basin, his physiological indicators changed abruptly. Heart rate increased, skin conductance rose slightly, and his eyelids widened, a sign often associated with unconscious recognition or memories linked to fear. Notably, each time the agent ran their finger over the Forney Creek Valley area, even when he was not asked to follow, Michael exhibited muscle tension, a slight lean backward, and faster than average blinking. In contrast, there was no similar reaction when the agent's hand moved to Noland Creek or nearby trails. To rule out random responses, the agents repeated the process multiple times by rotating the map, zooming in and out on areas, and changing display positions. The results remained consistent. The Forney Creek Basin region always elicited the strongest reactions, including elevated heart rate, slight shoulder muscle contraction, and a characteristic eye movement, his gaze lingering for just a split second before avoiding it. Behavioral analysis indicated this was a response consistent with a victim who had prolonged exposure to a specific space but was not yet ready or able to describe it verbally. The accompanying psychologists assessed that Michael showed signs of trauma-triggered avoidance reflex, meaning he unconsciously recognized the area tied to the traumatic experience, even though his conscious mind could not yet articulate or recreate the details. By cross-referencing Michael's unconscious responses with the prior forensic data, including soil samples, pollen, and insects, the FBI determined that Forney Creek Basin was the key area requiring in-depth investigation. The deep valley terrain with numerous rock crevices, dense canopy forest, and small stream branches provided conditions for a prolonged hiding spot that would be difficult for outsiders to detect, especially since the search 4 years earlier had primarily focused on main trails. Based on Michael's repeated physiological responses and the match with objective data, the FBI narrowed the investigation to a broad area surrounding Forney Creek Basin, prioritizing low-lying positions with high humidity and minimal signs of human passage. This was also an area that previous search teams were less likely to access due to steep terrain and dense vegetation. Combining environmental forensics with unconscious psychological responses, the FBI officially elevated Forney Creek to the focal point of the next investigation phase, marking a significant shift aimed at identifying where Michael's family might have been held during the entire period of disappearance. After designating Forney Creek Basin as the key area for survey, the FBI, in coordination with the National Park Service's Special Terrain Search Team, launched a small-scale but intensive tracking operation focusing on geographic points matching the forensic data and Michael's unconscious responses. The investigation team ventured deep into the forest, along slopes rarely trodden by hikers, crossing dense canopies and numerous small intersecting streams, areas that had not been thoroughly searched during the campaign 4 years earlier due to the treacherous terrain. While traveling along a tributary of Forney Creek, the team discovered a small piece of fabric caught under tree roots, partially rotted, but still retaining faint children's patterns. Preliminary examination suggested it could be part of a child's clothing sized appropriately for Evan or Lily Anderson's age. Not far away, a pink plastic hair clip was found under a layer of decayed leaves, its surface covered in mud and time-worn scratches, but the style common for elementary school children was still recognizable. The items were sealed and their exact positions marked with GPS, then compared to family photos from before the disappearance to assess compatibility. As the search expanded along the stream bed, the team found another piece of fabric, this time stained with dark brown streaks resembling long-dried blood. Due to advanced decomposition, laboratory analysis was needed to confirm if it was human blood and whether it matched the Anderson family's DNA. But the appearance of these items in the same geographic area helped outline a plausible path. All evidence was documented not only by coordinates, but also by surrounding terrain features, slope, stream flow, wind direction and covering soil layer, to determine whether they had washed down from elsewhere or originated in this spot. Preliminary analysis from the terrain team indicated that given the area's moderate slope and light stream flow, the likelihood of evidence being carried from far away was low. Instead, the distribution of the items, a fabric piece near tree roots, the hair clip under decayed leaves, and the blood-stained fabric on a higher bank above water level, suggested they had likely been dropped or discarded here at different times. Scene reconstruction experts noted that the relatively limited scatter of the evidence fit a scenario of someone moving through the area and leaving traces over at least a certain period, rather than random natural displacement. When mapping the evidence distribution, the team observed they formed a relatively straight axis extending from a higher flat area down to the stream bank, suggesting a temporary path or frequent route. The alignment of this location with the area identified by environmental forensics as the source of soil on Michael further supported the hypothesis that the Anderson family had been present here after disappearing in 2019, though it was not yet possible to determine how they arrived or the specific circumstances leading to these items being left. The team concluded that Forney Creek Basin was not only the area to which Michael reacted strongly, unconsciously, but also a place with physical signs proving the presence of family members after leaving the main trail. The three separate items, a small child's clothing fragment, a hair clip, and a blood-stained fabric piece, became critical leads, allowing the FBI to determine that this deep forest area was directly related to the Anderson family's disappearance journey, and that pursuing more detailed traces in this complex terrain was necessary to further clarify what happened after they left the Forney Ridge Trail. After collecting the scattered evidence and identifying Forney Creek Basin as an area likely directly related to the Anderson family's path, the FBI deployed an advanced survey phase using aerial equipment to detect signs that ground observation could not identify. The area's terrain, with numerous small valleys, tangled roots, dense foliage, and high humidity, severely limited visual observation, so the team used drones equipped with thermal cameras to scan grid sections in the designated region. During one morning flight, the drone recorded an area with abnormal heat signature in a densely canopied spot, several hundred meters from where the evidence was found. This heat point did not correspond to wildlife activity or sunlight, as the area was almost completely shaded. Instead, the temperature difference suggested the possible existence of an underground void where air was retained longer than in the surrounding soil. When the ground team approached the drone-marked coordinates, they noticed a slightly sunken layer of soil, covered in decayed leaves, with a faint circular or oval shape, as if compressed by weight or an underlying structure. After clearing away dry leaves and branches, the investigators discovered a rough wooden plank, largely covered by soil and moss. The plank was larger than a typical manhole cover, with hand-cut edges and knife marks on the surface, indicating it was crafted with simple tools rather than mechanical equipment. Upon closer inspection, the agents realized the plank was not naturally placed, but intentionally positioned to cover an underground opening. Its edges rested on small wooden beams forming a frame, showing deliberate reinforcement to prevent collapse. After removing the plank, a dark void opened up, several meters deep, narrow but sufficient for an adult to enter and exit. The entrance walls were soil supported by rotting forest timber, many pieces showing signs of being chopped or cut with a sharp knife rather than a professional saw. This crude yet calculated construction indicated the bunker was not natural, but a handmade structure built for a specific purpose. Inside the entrance, the air was damp, with smells of old soil, rotting wood, and a faint rusty metal odor. Light from carried devices revealed walls reinforced in layers, some areas with newer wood, others just compacted soil, indicating the bunker had been maintained or modified over time. The descent was steep, formed by flattened earth steps, likely created by repeated foot traffic over a long period. Due to risks of collapse or toxic gas buildup, the team did not descend deeply but used a wired camera for initial observation, confirming the bunker extended inward with at least one large enough space to hold objects or conceal activity. Recognizing this could be a critical location related to the Anderson family's missing period, the FBI immediately marked the area, established a security perimeter several tens of meters wide to avoid disturbing the scene, and temporarily sealed the entrance to protect it from environmental factors until a specialized forensic team arrived. The coordinates, plank condition, entrance structure, and surrounding features were all documented in detail for future site reconstruction. With this discovery, the team determined they had found an abnormal underground structure that could play a key role in decoding what happened during the 4 years the Anderson family was missing. But thorough preparation and specialized equipment were needed for a full internal survey immediately after the underground bunker was identified and the scene secured. The FBI's specialized forensic team, along with geologists and forensic investigators, conducted an internal survey following standard protocols for enclosed spaces potentially involving human confinement. After measuring oxygen levels and toxic gases to ensure safety, they lowered a ladder into the entrance and began documenting the overall structure. The bunker was larger than anticipated from external observation, consisting of 2 separate chambers divided by a soil wall reinforced with forest timber. The first chamber near the entrance was smaller and contained signs of basic living, such as a flatter soil floor, some timbers arranged into a low platform, and indentations indicating heavy objects had been placed there. The second chamber was deeper, smaller in area, and completely empty, except for clear marks on the walls and floor, indicating its function. A space used for holding people. The soil walls of this chamber bore numerous long and short scratch marks, some still sharp, others worn over time. The depth and position suggested they were made by repeated efforts under restricted movement. On 2 opposing wall sections, 2 rusted iron hooks were embedded deeply into the soil, each at about adult hip height. Friction marks on the nearby soil indicated they had been used to secure something or someone's wrists and ankles for extended periods. Near one corner, the team discovered clusters of tally marks, crudely carved into the soil wall, repeated in groups of 4 vertical lines and 1 diagonal, arranged in uneven rows. When counting, they recorded a total exceeding 1,000 units, indicating this was not random, but a systematic time-marking system, most likely tracking days of captivity. Some wall areas showed newer, less worn tally groups interspersed with older ones blurred by damp soil, suggesting the marking occurred over a long continuous period, not just a few weeks as Michael had stated. The chamber floor had compacted soil areas consistent with someone sitting or lying for many hours daily in a restricted posture. Certain spots near the walls showed arc-shaped wear patterns, indicating the person inside may have repeated a monotonous movement to alleviate stress or due to the cramped space. A short piece of wood was found in one corner, its surface scratched by fingernails or a weak, sharp object, suggesting it was used as a tool for scraping or marking. All traces inside the bunker matched the physical trauma characteristics recorded on Michael's body. The height of the hooks and distance between positions aligned with calluses on wrists and ankles, low humidity, lack of light, and limited ventilation, fully corresponded with vitamin D deficiency, muscle atrophy, and skeletal damage. The carved tallies reflected prolonged confinement, corresponding to estimates of years rather than weeks. The sunken soil layers around the confinement chamber proved the bunker had been used for an extended time and may have undergone multiple repair or expansion phases. When synthesizing all elements, the handmade structure, iron hook traces, quantity of date tallies, scratches, and wall discoloration, the forensic team concluded that the bunker was a purposefully built confinement space, operational for a long period, and entirely consistent with the forensic data obtained from Michael Anderson's body. During the forensic examination of the bunker, the team recovered several fingerprints that were still clear enough for comparison, particularly on the surfaces of the reinforcing wooden beams and the edges of the planks covering the bunker entrance. Locations less affected by moisture, thus better preserving prints. The fingerprint samples were processed using Minhydrin technique and spectral photography, then immediately sent to the federal database system for matching. The results came back faster than expected. Multiple samples matched an individual with a record in the system, Elliot Granger, a 56-year-old man who had previously lived on the northern outskirts of Bryson City and was recorded as an off-grid resident, meaning someone living outside the system with no stable residential address, no use of public utilities, and only sporadic appearances in basic registration transactions more than a decade ago. This fingerprint match became the first lead, identifying a suspect directly linked to the detention bunker. The FBI immediately pulled Granger's background file, revealing him to be an individual with a history of instability and multiple concerning behaviors in the past. The review showed that Elliot Granger had worked manual jobs in the logging industry during the 1990s, then lived reclusively in forested mountain areas around the Great Smoky Mountains. From 2008 onward, Granger essentially disappeared from administrative records. No tax filings, no vehicle registrations, no confirmed residential address. In local police records, he had been noted 3 times in connection with encounters with hikers, insufficient evidence for criminal charges, but clearly threatening in nature. 2 hikers reported that Granger appeared on the trail in the late afternoon, saying cryptic things about strangers in the woods and demanding they turn back because the area was not for outsiders. Another report noted him throwing rocks at a group of young people because he believed they were trespassing on his land. These incidents had no formal conclusions, but were flagged by rangers in the system as potentially high-risk behavior. Upon deeper analysis of Granger's past, the FBI discovered he had a minor prior conviction related to domestic violence from his younger years. But the file was closed after the family member moved to another state. These pieces, while not forming a clear criminal profile, suggested a dangerous pattern, a long-term isolated individual with a history of conflict, aggressive behavior towards strangers in forested environments, and the capability to maintain a complex underground structure like the discovered bunker. To assess his operational capability in deep forest areas, the FBI analyzed Granger's movement patterns based on previous ranger sightings over the years. Scattered data showed Granger frequently appeared along southern Smokies forest regions, primarily around Forney Creek, Deep Creek, and less visited areas. One ranger had encountered Granger while he was setting up a temporary shelter near Noland Creek in 2011, but when the ranger returned to check 2 days later, the shelter had completely vanished without a trace, a sign of highly mobile and calculated avoidance of attention. Investigators also noted that Granger had lived in abandoned cabins left from early 20th century logging operations, demonstrating knowledge of historical terrain and the ability to hide in locations difficult for outsiders to access. When combining all the data, the FBI assessed Granger as highly skilled at evasion, with extensive survival experience in the Smokies environment, plus knowledge of using natural materials to build or reinforce handmade structures. The underground bunker discovered, with its arrangement of collapse-preventing timber, compacted entry path, and repeatedly reinforced earth walls, perfectly matched the skills of someone with a logging background and years of forest living. Additionally, the fingerprint match strengthened the argument that Granger not only built but also used the bunker over an extended period. Further analysis of Granger's possible connections to local residents showed he lived in such isolation that no one could pinpoint the last clear sighting of him. A few witnesses reported seeing him from a great distance while hiking along the Deep Creek Trail, but no one spoke to or approached him because Granger always evaded contact, slipping into the woods upon noticing people. This isolated personality, lack of social interaction, and tendency to threaten strangers aligned with the psychological profile of individuals capable of constructing and operating a secret detention space deep in the forest with minimal detection. With the compiled data, matching fingerprints, behavioral history, survival capability, movement patterns, and terrain familiarity in the Smokies, the FBI designated Elliot Granger as the primary suspect in the construction and use of the discovered detention bunker, as well as the individual most likely directly involved in the prolonged disappearance of the Anderson family. Based on forensic data, Elliot Granger's profile, and the terrain characteristics of the Forney Creek Basin, the FBI reconstructed the abduction method to determine how Granger could have approached and subdued the Anderson family when they veered off the main trail in 2019. Analysis of prior hiker encounters showed Granger typically stalked forest visitors from a distance, concealing himself in dense areas and approaching when he detected group separation or deviation from busy routes. This pattern fit the Andersons' last sighting near the turnoff to Andrews Bald, an area with many obscure side paths, easily overlooked and prone to leading unfamiliar groups astray. When cross-referencing with the bunker's location, investigators determined Granger most likely tracked the family from below the slope, waiting until the group moved into a visually obscured position before launching a sudden overpowering attack or using threatening tools. The greatest vulnerability of family groups was young children prone to panic, forcing parents to focus on protection and creating an opening for the attacker to quickly gain dominance. By separating one adult from the children, Granger could destabilize the family's natural defensive structure. The FBI's reenactment simulation suggested he likely bound or subdued Michael first, forcing him away from his wife and children, leaving Dana facing a situation where she could neither flee nor resist for fear of endangering the kids. Once the family was under control, Granger could lead them through treacherous side forest routes from which an unfamiliar group, especially with tired, frightened young children, could not escape on their own, particularly in low light or late afternoon conditions. The discovered bunker had two separate chambers, suggesting a victim control tactic of division: the outer chamber for the captor's minimal living needs, the deeper chamber for holding victims, restricting light, sound, and completely controlling movement range. The arrangement of iron hooks on walls, friction marks on the ground, and wear on entry steps indicated victims were restrained long-term, allowed only very limited movement, and controlled in cycles. The presence of overlapping scratch marks and clusters of day-count notches, with varying depth and wear, proved continuous, ongoing detention, with updates over time, not a single or short-term event. Newer scratch groups near the iron hooks suggested victims were once secured there, marking days right at their restraint points. Forensic analysis of Michael's bodily injuries, improperly healed broken ribs, calluses on wrists and ankles, small burn scars, perfectly matched bunker conditions, lack of light causing muscle atrophy and prolonged malnutrition, dampness damaging skin, and movement restriction, preventing proper healing of old wounds. These details enabled the FBI to construct a feasible detention timeline, the first year involving victim resistance and heavy injury. Subsequent years, maintaining controlled exhaustion with minimal nutrition to keep victims alive but too weak to escape or overpower the captor. The distribution of external evidence, decomposed children's clothing, blood-stained fabric scraps, hair clips, aligned with the assessment that the Andersons were not attacked at one spot but led through multiple locations, possibly during escape attempts or forced movement in a sequence of coerced activities. The evidence's placement in hard-to-reach terrain further supported long-term containment deep in the forest without external contact. Combining bunker structure, interior traces, external evidence, and Michael's injuries, the FBI reached a clear conclusion. This was not impulsive or spontaneous, but an organized long-term abduction at a handmade level, operated by an individual experienced in off-grid living, skilled at concealment, victim luring, and maintaining absolute control in rugged mountain forest. This perfectly matched Elliot Granger's profile and off-grid lifestyle, indicating he was highly capable of sustaining prolonged detention with preparation in tools, structure, and operational methods far beyond what initial 2019 search teams could detect. After Michael Anderson's psychological and physical condition stabilized further, FBI specialists conducted a second interview session, this time aimed at gathering detailed information he could not provide in the initial interview due to psychological disturbance and fragmented memory. The interview environment was carefully controlled, dim lighting, minimal sound, and no sudden triggers, allowing Michael to maintain focus longer. In this stable setting, he began describing the early days of captivity more clearly. According to Michael, Granger approached them in the afternoon when the group was trying to head back toward Forney Ridge, but had veered into a less traveled area. He had stalked them for a while before choosing the moment both children stepped a few paces away from their parents to look at a rock outcrop, then attacked suddenly. Michael was struck hard from behind on the head, lost balance, and was bound immediately, while Dana was subdued through threats that resistance would endanger the children's lives. As the family was marched through dense forest paths, Michael noticed Granger deliberately separating him from his wife and kids by forcing Dana to carry the children ahead while he brought up the rear, keeping Michael under control with ropes and violence. Upon being taken into the bunker, Michael said the main detention chamber, the deeper one, was used to hold him, while Dana and the children were initially placed in the outer chamber. Their positions were separated but close enough for him to hear sounds from his wife and kids, though not always clearly distinguishable due to the bunker's darkness and constant echoes. In the early days, Michael tried to stay calm to protect Dana and the children, but Granger maintained dominance through threatening actions, such as banging hard on bunker walls, creating loud noises in the dark, or using metal tools to produce sounds that terrified the kids. Michael said Granger frequently moved between chambers, occasionally bringing limited food or water, giving even less to him than to those in the outer chamber. He used this distribution as a control tool, making Michael feel responsible and compliant out of fear that rations for his wife and children would be cut. One key point in the second interview was a more detailed description of forced labor Granger made Michael perform. He said he was forced to dig earth to expand the bunker, reinforce timber beams, clear branches, or move heavy objects he couldn't clearly see, but guessed were rock debris or dry soil. These tasks occurred at night or in very low light, preventing Michael from tracking time or day-night cycles. This forced labor clearly explained his physical exhaustion and repeated injuries to hands, wrists, and leg joints, marks fully consistent with forensic conclusions. When asked about his relative position to his wife and children in the bunker, Michael described periods when the family was closer, with Granger allowing all three in the outer chamber while he remained inner. Other times, Granger moved the children to a chamber where he couldn't see or hear them clearly. This matched the FBI's assessment that the bunker was designed for victim separation to reduce coordination or resistance capability. Regarding escape attempts, Michael explained that for most of the captivity, escape was impossible because Granger appeared unpredictably, tightly controlled the chambers, and always positioned himself to hear any movement. However, in the final months, he noticed Granger began leaving the bunker for longer periods, possibly to hunt or resupply, and that was when Michael started closely observing the bunker structure. He recalled that after a heavy rain, part of the main chamber's earth wall softened, creating a small crevice near the floor. He tried widening it bare-handed and with wood scraps from a corner, but due to extreme weakness, progress was slow and risky as any noise could alert Granger. During unusually long absences, Michael continued enlarging the gap millimeter by millimeter, concealing traces with compacted dry soil. The real opportunity came one night, when Granger was away longer than usual. By then, Michael had widened the crevice enough to squeeze half his body through, despite severe scrapes. He used his remaining strength to wriggle out, crawl up the earthen slope, escape the dense canopy, and head toward what he guessed was a road or light, though uncertain. After hours of exhaustion and disorientation, he emerged near US 441, eventually captured on a gas station camera. Michael's second interview, though still missing many details and containing large memory gaps, provided a more consistent picture aligning with forensic data, especially regarding Granger's control methods, bunker structure, separation process, and coercion tactics. This helped the FBI confirm that the captivity was not temporary, but a long-term organized system designed for absolute victim domination. Based on Michael's second statement and Elliot Granger's long-term behavioral records, the FBI began tracking the suspect by analyzing possible movement routes around the Forney Creek Basin. Locations where Granger had been sighted over many years, primarily along remote forest sections between Forney Creek and Deep Creek, were prioritized for searches. Combining this data with off-grid living patterns and water source analysis, the FBI identified 3 suspicious areas where Granger might have built a cabin or temporary shelter. One of these was a deep forest strip about a mile from the Deep Creek Trail, where old burn marks and signs of manual woodcutting had been noted in forestry surveys years earlier. The task force was deployed quietly, splitting into multiple teams in an encircling pattern, minimizing noise to avoid alerting the suspect. As they advanced into the area, reconnaissance drones spotted a small wooden structure nestled among dense tree canopy, nearly undetectable from the ground unless approached from the exact direction. When the ground team reached the cabin, they observed signs of recent activity, embers still warm in the fire pit, a few rudimentary tools, and fresh footprints in the mud. Realizing Granger might still be nearby, the team established a wide perimeter to block natural escape routes. However, as agents closed in, one member spotted a figure moving quickly through the trees behind the cabin, triggering an immediate pursuit. Granger fled toward a steep rocky slope leading to a tributary of Deep Creek, using the rugged terrain to gain speed and constantly changing direction. He navigated skillfully over large tree roots and moss-covered rocks, demonstrating years of familiarity with the landscape. The pursuing team split into 2 groups, one staying close behind, the other flanking downstream to cut him off. During the escape, Granger tried to hide behind a large boulder, but a thermal drone had already pinpointed his position. Upon realizing he was detected, he bolted down a narrower path, but slipped on wet rocks, giving agents the opening to close in. One agent approached from the side, using a safe takedown technique to subdue him without serious injury. Granger resisted briefly before being handcuffed and removed from the dangerous area. The entire arrest unfolded quickly, but required tight coordination between drones, ground pursuit teams, and the intercept group. After subduing him, Granger received an initial medical check to confirm he was fit for transport, then was escorted to a secure staging area near the Deep Creek trailhead. The arrest concluded without any casualties, and the suspect was immediately transferred to federal detention for interrogation. After Elliot Granger's arrest and transfer to federal detention, the Department of Justice swiftly finalized the indictment, leading to a trial in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Tennessee, where all evidence collected by the FBI throughout the investigation was presented to the jury. A series of forensic findings were introduced, including soil, pollen, and insect samples matching the Forney Creek Basin ecosystem, Granger's fingerprints on the bunker hatch cover and reinforcing beams, items found near the creek, such as decomposed children's clothing and hair clips, and the bunker structure itself with its 2 chambers and numerous signs of prolonged captivity. Forensic experts explained how each piece of evidence interconnected to form a seamless timeline, the Anderson family straying from the trail, being attacked and taken to the bunker by Granger, years of captivity, and Michael's eventual escape when heavy rain weakened the structure. Michael's medical report was presented to prove prolonged confinement, including muscle atrophy, improperly healed fractures, severe vitamin deficiencies, and injuries consistent with bunker conditions. Michael's second statement was introduced, focusing on the timelines he could recall. The initial attack, separation from Dana and the 2 children, forced labor to expand the bunker, and instances of violence and threats used by Granger to maintain control. Although his memory had gaps, psychological experts testified that prolonged trauma severely impacts recall, but everything he described aligned perfectly with the physical evidence collected. In court, prosecutors argued 3 main charges. First, federal kidnapping, established by forcibly removing the Anderson family from a public trail and unlawfully confining them in a purposefully constructed bunker. Second, prolonged unlawful confinement, proven by the bunker design, marks on Michael's body, and features inside like day-count scratches and iron hooks. Third, based on items like blood-stained fabric scraps and the disappearance of Dana and the children, prosecutors charged murder, or at minimum reckless endangerment causing death, if bodies could not be recovered, as federal law allows prosecution on strong circumstantial evidence. Defense counsel attempted to argue that Granger was an off-society recluse with mental instability and lacked capacity for organized criminal intent. However, evidence of the dual-chamber bunker, multi-layer reinforcements, use of restraints, and long-term maintenance refuted claims of unconscious or unplanned actions. Additionally, Granger's flight when agents approached his cabin reinforced that he understood the criminal nature of his conduct. During victim impact statements, Michael delivered a concise but consistent account of his captivity, from Granger's threats and forced labor to his efforts to survive. Though his voice trembled and memories were fragmented, jurors could cross-reference his testimony with photos and physical evidence, especially the bunker and his injuries, establishing credibility. After deliberations lasting many hours, the jury returned verdicts. Elliot Granger guilty of federal kidnapping, prolonged unlawful confinement, and criminal responsibility for the presumed deaths of 3 Anderson family members. Given the severity, duration, cruelty of the captivity pattern, and consequences, the judge imposed the maximum sentence, life imprisonment without parole, ensuring Granger would never be released to endanger the public again. Following the trial's conclusion and Elliot Granger's life sentence without parole, primary focus shifted to Michael Anderson's recovery, a survivor of 4 years in extreme captivity, who then became the key witness in a major federal case. According to medical and psychological evaluations, Michael continued facing long-term trauma effects, sleep disorders, claustrophobia, heightened startle responses to sudden sounds, and difficulty reintegrating into crowded environments. Long-term therapy programs were established to help him gradually regain a sense of time, distinguish memories from fear triggers, and rebuild independent living skills. Though progress was slow, Michael showed clear improvement from his initial rescue, particularly in communication and trust in safe settings. The case also had profound impact on the hiking community around Great Smoky Mountains, previously considered one of the safest destinations for visitors and families. The revelation that an individual could build and operate a secret bunker for years in the park's core wilderness prompted authorities to overhaul security protocols and missing persons response plans. New regulations were implemented, requiring hikers to register exact routes and expected return times, expanding trailhead camera networks, deploying motion sensors in high-risk areas, and increasing ranger patrols during late afternoon and evening hours. The park also launched community education programs to help visitors recognize unusual signs, handle being followed, and report suspicious behavior to rangers promptly. For investigators, the case became a landmark in improving approaches to deep woods disappearances. Previously, most Smokies missing persons cases were treated as accidents or getting lost, but the Anderson family proved that in vast hundreds of square-mile areas, serious criminal elements cannot be dismissed. Key lessons included earlier behavioral and environmental forensic analysis, rather than relying solely on trails or witness statements. Techniques like thermal drones, soil pollen analysis, and Michael's subconscious map reactions proved decisive and were later incorporated into standard NPS and FBI protocols for rugged national parks. The case also led federal authorities to reassess wilderness security, resulting in increased funding for patrol staffing, search equipment, and expanded forest communication networks, previously hampered by coverage dead zones. Local residents around Bryson City and Cherokee were initially shocked that someone living completely off-grid like Granger had existed undetected in their midst without anyone recognizing the danger. Over time, however, the community became more proactive in reporting unusual activity and assisting rangers in monitoring remote areas. Throughout the Smokies Trail system, new warning signs were installed emphasizing group hiking, staying on marked paths, and immediate reporting of signs of being followed. For Michael, the road ahead remained long, but he no longer faced it alone. Support from family, experts, and the community formed a new safety net to aid his recovery after years of isolation. Though physical and psychological scars might never fully heal, Granger's capture and conviction gave Michael an initial step toward stability. At the same time, the case left a lasting mark, driving changes in agency approaches and raising community awareness about hidden complexities in the seemingly peaceful forests of Great Smoky Mountains. The story of the Anderson family and Michael's miraculous rescue reflects a painful reality in modern American life. Vast wilderness areas, symbols of freedom and connection to nature, can also become places of hidden danger through carelessness or lack of preparation. In a country where national parks like Great Smoky Mountains attract millions of visitors annually, the lessons from this tragic journey apply not only to trekkers, but serve as a broader warning about personal safety, mental health, and community emergency response. The Andersons disappeared simply by straying a short distance off trail, a seemingly minor detail proving that just minutes of inattention can lead to devastating consequences. In an era when many Americans seek nature to escape work stress, basic safety rules like logging routes, carrying GPS devices, and always hiking in groups are more vital than ever. The story also underscores the value of forensic science and modern technology in investigations. Soil and pollen analysis, thermal drone imaging, and Michael's subconscious map reactions, very specific details, enabled the FBI to locate the bunker and solve the case. This reminds us that in today's America, where technology is increasingly integrated into daily life, combining data with human intuition can save lives. But the deepest lesson likely comes from Michael's recovery journey. Prolonged trauma, lost sense of time, extreme startle responses, these reflect the reality that mental health requires care equal to physical health. In a busy society like the U.S., where stress and isolation can silently erode people, seeking professional help and openly discussing pain is essential. Finally, the case reminds us that communities are stronger when people pay attention and report unusual behavior promptly. Hikers who encountered Granger but dismissed it as not serious may have missed chances to prevent tragedy. Thus, the takeaway is, in a vast and free nation like the United States, safety begins with individual awareness, community vigilance, and trust in support systems, from technology and law to mental health resources. Thank you for following the haunting yet inspiring survival story of the Anderson family. If you'd like to explore more mysterious American cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video, where we'll continue uncovering truths buried in the shadows of seemingly peaceful lands.